Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar. We're looking at the connection between cause and effect in purchase to pay, specifically honing in on 4 truths that we'll be looking to unveil to you during the next 60 minutes. So I extend to you a very warm welcome indeed. I'm one of your presenters for today, and I'm very pleased to say that on the platform today we have Tony Davis, who is Kofax MarkView Solutions EMEA lead from Kofax. So before we move into looking at the connection between cause and effects within purchase to pay, I'd just like to hand over to Tony for a quick introduction to Kofax, please. Over to you, Tony.
Many thanks, Susie, and a warm welcome, everyone. I thought I'd just take 2 minutes to let you know who Kofax actually are. And we're very pleased to be sponsoring this event. I hope you find it interesting and particularly useful. Kofax have been in business for around 25 years. We're profitable, growing, and a truly global organization with offices and partners in well over 100 companies. It's interesting that we actually invest about 15% of our total revenues straight back into the product development. This actually equates to more than many of our competitors actually turn over. We've got thousands of customers, and on the next slide you'll see a snapshot of just some of our MarkView accounts payable automation customers. I'll be back later to explain a little bit of the technology, and in the meantime I'm going to hand back to Susie to go through the survey results for you. Many thanks, and back to you, Susie.
Thank you very much, Tony. So just so you're very familiar with how this works, this is a two-way dialogue that we have here. It's a 60-minute session. It's very, very important for me and Tony that you get the most out of this session. So make sure that you get answers to questions that are on your mind right now. Send me your question nice and early, and the sooner you send me the question, the more likely it is that it will be asked. Remember to stay on, especially for the last 10 minutes of the session when we'll be going into the Q&A. Right, now let's get into the content. So very pleased that we have Kofax sponsoring this session today. Just to give you some background, we ran a survey in December of last year, and Kofax sponsored that survey. And this really is the kind of the backbone on which this webinar is taking place. So what we've got for the next 60 minutes in terms of the agenda is the following. We'll look at the context, a little bit on the background information, and then looking at the effects and then the influencing factors, i.e. the causes within purchase to pay. We'll then be looking at the 4 truths, closing with a summary, and then on to questions. So in terms of the context, what is this session about? As we all know as human beings, there is a direct connection between behavior and outcome, or cause and effect, in all areas of our private life, our personal lives, and of course our professional and business lives. Purchase to pay is an absolutely key example of this, and why is that? Well, all of us on the call today who have high volume transactions within the accounts payable organization, we'll know that what is wrapped around that is a very high number of KPIs and metrics. So we can see by changing one piece of behavior within purchase to pay, we can see quite quickly what the impact of that behavior is on the outcome or on the performance levels of that particular KPI. But what we really wanted to find out was what were the actual behaviors within purchase to pay that indeed get the best results. So back at the end of last year, we worked with Kofax on a study which was part of the AP Automation Summit that took place in London in December. And the intention of that study was really just to find out what the key behaviors were that drove top performing performances within purchase to pay. And here are some of the key findings over the next 60 minutes. So you're aware the sample size involved was around 30. So most shared services organizations and high volume purchase to pay organizations will agree that, that we are on a journey. And the journey looks something on the whole like the following. We have start off with the centralization of a function so that most accounts payable transactions are managed within one location. We'll look to consolidate a number of ERPs from many down to one or a handful. And we'll look to standardize the process so that there's a good process and that anything that isn't the good process is indeed a bad process. And the intention is that over time, the number of transactions that follow the bad process declines. It gets smaller and smaller. And the number of invoices that follow the good process obviously increases. The key background, if you will, of this study was around the levels of automation and the deployment of automation. And this really is the fourth kind of leg within this improvement, this purchase to pay improvement journey, and it's around the automation of the process. And automation with the intention really to drive the cost down as much as possible, to be as time efficient as possible, to have as high controls as possible, and also to move shared services as far up the value chain as possible. So that shared services isn't just focusing on data entry, they're actually moving up the value chain and becoming a very important and strategic partner to the rest of the business. So let's just stop for a moment and think about what we're actually talking about here, and how I'd like to present this to you is within the context of something that sharedserviceslink.com calls the AP metrics, which will become clear to you over the next 3 slides as to what that actually is. So when we talk about purchase to pay, we are actually talking about something, a process which has many, many steps in it. And you can see here, and this is not a bad process flow. This is a good process flow diagram that we've got here for a relatively good transaction. It's a purchase to pay transaction that starts life with a search on a catalogue, with a preferred supplier list being adhered to, with a requisition and a purchase order being created, etc. But you can still see here that if you take your eye down to the bottom right-hand corner, you've got over 20 steps in the process, and you've got 4, if you will, bodies being involved within this process flow, within this transaction flow. So you've got procurement, you've got the supplier, you've got the out in the business unit, and then you've got the accounts payable in the green boxes. So you've got over 20 process steps, you've got 4 bodies, and in addition to that, you've also got 2 companies. So you've got stuff that happens within your own company walls, but then you've got another company as well in the form of the supplier. So if you add on top of that layer, you add another layer of complexity, which again really is the context behind this study, and you have a look at your supplier base, you've potentially got, if you will, 100, 200, half a million, 1 million invoices coming in each year into your environment from maybe 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, 100,000 suppliers. So if you cast your mind back to the purchase to pay process flow that I just put up for you earlier, and then you think how many times through the course of the year that happens, and it could be 500,000 times, it could be 5 million times, and from 10,000, 50,000 different suppliers, what we're looking at here is something that is actually incredibly complex. So the importance is, when it comes to cause and effect, is to make sure that if the overall effect, i.e. the performance of your purchase to pay organization, is going to be elegant, then the behavioral piece, i.e. all those pieces that we've just talked about, the steps, the different functions, and the different companies that are involved, and the different kinds of suppliers that are involved, they need to behave in a particular way, which really kind of puts a key importance on cause and effect in purchase to pay. If we look at the technology, you can see down on the left-hand column, you've got the different technology, enabling technologies out there that really help automate purchase to pay in a very elegant way. So you've got e-catalogue, supplier portals, etc., all the way down to electronic payments. And then if you take your eye across the top, you've got the different steps in the purchase to pay process. So you've got end-to-end P2P, but then you've also got procurement, invoice delivery steps, matching, etc. And then the final box at the top right you've got the different types of suppliers. You've got your high volume suppliers, mid volume suppliers, and your low volume suppliers. So the point here is that I was wanting to find out really, again, as kind of the context of this survey, is there a single solution that applying to all of the steps in the process for all types of invoices and all types of suppliers? And as you can see here from the kind of this matrix being fully populated, the answer is no. So another complexity within purchase to pay is to ensure that you've got all of these different steps from all of these different suppliers covered off in an automated electronic fashion, and that they all obviously are very successful in their own right, but they also liaise with each other. So I now want to go into the survey proper and cover off some key components with you. But just before I do that, I just want to put to you a poll question, please, which is coming on screen now. And it's a very simple question. How many invoices do you process per annum? Is it less than 100,000, 100,000 to 250,000, 250,000 to 500,000, 500,000 to 1 million, or more than 1 million invoices per annum? If you could, please do contribute. Please do use this as a benchmarking exercise in your own right. And we've got 58% of you voted. Please, if you haven't already voted, please do so. I will be showing the results and closing the poll. Any more of you voting, please do so. Be closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. We're at 77% of you participating in that one. Let's see if we can get the next one up to 80. So coming up on your screens now, so you can see here we've got a quarter of you with processing less than 100,000 invoices per annum, 75% of you, 76% of you over 100,000 invoices per annum. Of that, 15% processing 1 million invoices or more per annum. So we've got high volume organisations on this webinar today. So let's come back to this, the survey results. So I just wanted to give you a bit of a context as to who was involved, who are the 30 organisations that were involved in this study, before we go into the real kind of exciting piece, which in my view are the actual trends. So how many invoices do you process per annum was one of the key questions that we asked. 58% of respondents were processing over 200,000 invoices per annum. So similar to the organisations on the phone, these were large volume organisations. Also wanted to find out what the shared services setup was within the sample base. And you can see here that over 3/4 of respondents had either centralised accounts payable or a shared services organisation. Just before we find out what the ERP landscape was, I'd like to move on to our second poll, just to do a like-for-like comparison. So coming up on your screen now, what ERP or accounting system do you currently use today? Is it SAP Wall-to-Wall, SAP and other, Oracle Wall-to-Wall, JD Edwards, PeopleSoft, Aggresso, or other? So again, if you could cast your votes, please, and we'll do a like-for-like comparison and actually see how it compares with those that participated in the study. 73% of you have responded. If you could cast your vote, if you haven't already, try and get north of 80. We're at 82%. Thank you very much. Closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. Let's have a look at the responses coming up on your screen now. You can see here, interestingly, only 6% SAP Wall-to-Wall, 39% SAP and other. So interesting mix there, and we've got 22% Oracle Wall-to-Wall. So interesting results there. Thank you very much for that. Let's just compare that with what we had on the technology landscape, just here, beg your pardon, coming up here. What ERP do you run on? So we've got, interestingly, 46% of respondents to the survey run off SAP, and this is one version, not many versions, but one version. And we're seeing increasingly a lot of organisations moving to just a single instance of their ERP, and we also just generally observe that in Europe, in particular, the favoured child, if you will, as far as ERPs is concerned, is indeed SAP. So normally we're seeing 60% or more of our members and they're high volume shared services organizations running off SAP. So it was quite interesting for me to find out, as far as going back to volumes of invoices, how many suppliers actually sent those volumes of invoices. So how many suppliers do you actually receive 100% of your invoices from? And we can see here that 30% of respondents had over 10,000 suppliers, and you can see some had over 50,000, some had over 100,000. So again, if you're looking at the kind of number of influencing parties that have an impact on your purchase to pay, organization purchase to pay performance, obviously the more suppliers you have, the wider you are casting your net as far as people that can have an impact on the performance of your purchase to pay organization. So the fewer suppliers that you have, the tighter your purchase to pay performance may indeed be. So that was quite an interesting observation. I wanted to find out as well, if we've just boiled it down and we had a look at the 80-20 rule, how many suppliers did you actually receive 80%, or do you actually receive 80% of your invoices from? Now this is a really important piece, because if you can just fix in your purchase to pay automation program 80% of your transactions, then how many suppliers do you need to focus on in order to get to that 80%? And this was quite encouraging, because 35% of respondents received 80% of invoices from less than 500 suppliers. And what this means is that you can take what could look like, from a kind of a high-level perspective, quite an overwhelming project on a purchase to pay automation program, which of course you have to involve your supplier in. Takes it from a kind of an overwhelming project, if you do indeed have 10,000 or so suppliers, down to something that's actually very manageable if you realize that actually 80% of your invoices is only coming from 500 or 400 suppliers. It makes it much more digestible, much more manageable, and you can really focus on the quick wins. I wanted also to find out what technologies did the participant use. So you can see here that the three most widely adopted technologies were scanning and OCR data capture, workflow, and an ERP. At the top, you can see dynamic discounting, supply chain financing, not something that's necessarily widely used today. It is indeed something that we're noticing as an observer to this market, that it's rising up in the interest levels. So quite interesting there. That takes me on to the third poll. So coming up on your screens now, coming up now. This is to do with timing. So if you could tick the box most appropriate to you. As far as your own automation is concerned, when are you actually looking to automate? Would you say that you're already automated? So the majority of your steps and your process flow, or the majority of your invoices, are automated. Are you going live in 2012, planning to go live in 2013, or something that you're not quite sure about as yet? 60% of you voted. If you could tick the box most appropriate to you, and I will be closing the polls in 3, 2, 1. We've got 76% of you voting there. Your screens now, you can see the results to that poll question. So encouragingly, just shy of 50% of you are already automated, 20% of you going live in 2012, 3% planning on 2013, and 29% not sure. So thank you very much. Let's get back to the responses to the survey. So I also wanted to find out in the survey that we asked, what is your #1 driver for purchase to pay improvement? Now, before I build this slide, I just want to ask you the question, what do you think the #1 driver is? So if you can just kind of mentally in your own mind bring to the front, what do you think would be your answer to this question? If I'd asked this question probably about 2 or so years ago, I think the #1 driver would have been around control and around visibility of information, visibility of data. So I was quite intrigued to see what the responses were here, where actually control came up as quite a kind of an unpopular choice, if you will, and the key one in this particular survey was cost reduction. 44% of respondents said cost reduction and 4% said control. Now, cost reduction was so key probably about 10 years ago when high levels of adoption of shared services were coming into play, high levels of adoption of shared services coming into play, and probably about 5 years ago when organizations were focusing a lot on automation technologies. But it kind of died away a little bit when we went into the economic crisis and there was a recession, and that almost stepped away a little bit and control came into significance. It now looks like cost reduction is very much back at the #1 place. So I thought that was a very interesting observation there. So also just wanted to find out what are your top 3 signed off projects for the next 12 months. And if I can just cast your mind to the bottom of this, where the 3 bars are with a red box around them, you can see that priority projects are around improving the travel and entertainment expense process, standardizing P2P process globally, and the important word is globally there, and also electronic invoicing as coming in as the favorites. Right, that's the kind of the background piece. So I now want to walk you through another chapter, which is on the effects. So when we talk about effects in purchase to pay, what we're typically focusing in on is KPIs. And we're all familiar with KPIs, and we all have KPIs that tell us how the health of our purchase to pay process, and KPIs are becoming increasingly important to leaders in the purchase to pay and shared services space. So many of these will resonate with you, and you can benchmark your own KPIs against what you see here on these charts. So I wanted to find out how many invoices does one person process per annum within your AP department AP function. This, of course, is around productivity. So you can see here that the right-hand box, 38% process over 20,000 invoices per annum, 55% less than 15,000 invoices per annum. Now, if we just cross-reference that with some of the statistics that analysts make readily available, we know that a top-performing shared services organization will be processing about 45,000 invoices or north of per annum. And an average one will be between 13,000 and 14,000 invoices per annum. So you can see here that we've got an even split, but really I think the takeaway from this is that if you want to be moving up your productivity up per annum, so number of invoices processed per annum per head, then you get to a certain ceiling when you just do it in a manual world. And to really kind of move into the world where it's 30,000, 50,000, 100,000, that's when a switch to technology is a huge enabler for you and really starts taking you into a different stratosphere. What is your average cost per invoice, including all invoice types, so POs and non-POs, electronic, EDI scan, paper? And we've got here, again, a bit of a mix. We've got 35% of respondents on the right-hand side average at more than €5 per invoice. If I'm going to take the extreme, you can see here we had some respondents ticking the 30 to 50 euros per transaction, and just kind of worst case scenario, if you will, but just kind of go along with me because it really does prove a point. If you are processing 500,000 transactions and it's costing you 50 euros a go, that means just to process those 500,000 transactions, it's costing you 25 million euros per annum. If you applied everything that we're going to be talking about in this webinar and had huge successes and managed to get the 50 euros down to €1, you're looking at a cost of 500,000 euros just to pay those 500,000 invoices. If you think about the saving between obviously 500,000 having got there from 25 million, year-on-year savings, say over a 5-year period, you're talking about huge savings to the bottom line. So this is why the average cost per invoice and measuring it is absolutely critical to the direction that the purchase to pay organization moves in. You can see here that 15% of respondents came in at an average of less than €1. It is absolutely achievable. It's because first-time match rates are nice and high, and technology has been deployed, and there might even be a little bit of offshoring in the mix as well. So as far as KPIs as well, a chief KPI for, I'm sure, everyone on the webinar today is around first-time match rates. And first-time match rates, a higher first-time match rate, it's very indicative of a very good, well-oiled purchase-to-pay organization. So if you've got a nice high first-time match rate coming in at over 90%, chances are you're running a very tight ship, and your cost per invoice is probably nice and low as well. So 44% of respondents have a first-time match rate of less than 49%. So I think it's fair to say that there were, well, that in my book, that's coming in below average. We've got 16% in the purple cheese, coming in at 80 to 89% first-time match rate. Another chief KPI is around payment terms. Wanted to find out what percentage of invoices do you actually pay to terms. If you are actually paying 100% or 90% of your invoices to terms, again, it's indicative of a nice, healthy purchase-to-pay organisation or process. It also means that you're probably in a good position to start taking advantage of early payment discounts, dynamic discounting, supply chain financing. So you can see here that 54% of respondents pay 80% of invoices to terms. And I also wanted to find out what percentage of invoices did the participants in the survey receive electronically, either through EDI, e-invoicing networks, electronic ERS or self-billing, or P-card. The kind of thrust of this was how many invoices that are sent to you do not start life as a piece of paper. So you can see here that's 64% of respondents, that's the blue, red and the green cheeses, receive 19% electronic invoices or less. So again, probably indicative of a market that has huge scope for maturing there. And I also wanted to find out what percentage of invoices are touchless today. So received electronically, not touched at all by accounts payable or the business, and completely what we would call just straight through, so straight through processing. And you can see here that 8% of respondents see between 40 and 69% of their invoices as completely touchless. So with that in mind, the final poll question coming up on your screen now. What percentage of invoices for you are actually handled manually today? Less than 20%, 21 to 50%, 51 to 80%, 81 to 99%, or 100%. So before we go on to what I would then classify as the causes, we've just been talking about the effects now, which are the KPIs, and we're going to move on to the causes in just a moment. I would like you to answer this question for me, please. So we're at 66% of you voting. If you haven't voted, please do so. What percentage of your invoices are handled manually today? If you don't know exactly, just give us an intelligent guesstimation. Less than 20%, 21 to 50%, 51 to 80%, 81 to 99%, or 100%. We're at 79% of you voting. Closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. Let's have a look at the responses coming up on your screen now. So to remind you of the question, what percentage of your invoices are handled manually today? I have to say very pleased that only 8% said 100% are handled manually today. And we've got 16% coming in at less than 20% handled manually today. So I would say that's encouraging. It's kind of a typical bell curve there, but I think my takeaway from that is that that is an encouraging response. Let's move on. Okay. So as far as the influencing factors are concerned, and this is what we'd like to draw on as the causes. So coming up on your screen now, you can see when analysts such as Hackett interview top-performing shared services organizations, a key question is how aligned is your accounts payable and procurement function? How aligned are they? And the top-performing shared services organizations will have a very high percentage saying that they are very, very aligned. So you can see here that the options in the responses were not aligned, but we have the intention to change this. That's the blue cheese, partially aligned, the red cheese, aligned on most things, the green cheese, and absolutely aligned, the purple cheese. There was actually a fifth option, which was not aligned at all and no intention to change this. And I have to say, very pleased to say that nobody ticked that whatsoever. 37% of respondents are absolutely aligned or aligned on most things. How do you charge your business units for the services that you render? So either we charge based on activity, like an activity-based costing mechanism, charging more for a non-PO invoice and less for a PO invoice. Or we charge a flat fee, that's reflected in the red cheese at 41%, or we do not charge at all, coming in at 23%. 36% of respondents do charge on an activity-based costing basis, and you can see that just over 3/4 of companies actually charge. So there's a general trend that more and more purchase-to-pay organisations or shared services organisations are charging for their services. Do you have a purchase-to-pay owner or leader in your business? 54% of respondents do. They do have a purchase-to-pay process owner or leader, and this isn't just a nominal aspect. It means something. It means that there is an owner, an individual that owns that process from the birth of the transaction, when either the requisition was made or even a few steps before that, right the way through to payment of that transaction. So for the birth of that transaction right the way to the death, there is a process owner, and increasingly we're seeing that process owner is a global role, so that there is one unified and accepted process for purchase to pay within the organisation. So you can see here 54% of respondents do have a purchase to pay process owner. 14% said no, but we are considering it, and 32% said no, and we are not considering it right now. I also wanted to find out about league tables. And again, league tables is something that shared service organisations are beginning to get their teeth into. They're beginning to realise the importance of league tables and the impact that they can have on behaviour generally. However, I have to say it would be nice for this figure to be much higher. Just over 1/4 of the respondents said that they do have league tables and they make them fully visible to senior management. 5% have league tables, don't make them available to senior management, and 68% said that they do not have they do not have a league table. With all that in mind, I'd now like to pass back to Tony for a technology overview. Back to you, Tony.
Many thanks, Susie, and some of those results were quite encouraging, I thought. So what I thought I'd do is spend just a few minutes to outline some technology solutions that may be of interest, because we find that most organizations receive a vast amount and variety of information across their entire company and enterprise. A lot of the information comes in as documents from outside the organization, like sales orders, contracts, HR, invoices, of course, and job applications. But a lot comes from within as well, like expense reports and benefit forms. All that information is arriving in an ever-growing variety of formats. And until recently, organizations only had to worry about incoming paper documents, and those alone created a significant challenge. But today, we also have to handle information arriving through the web, email, fax, SMS, MMS, and any number of any other electronic formats. On top of that, all this information is being sent from and received at many different locations. For example, an insurance company is receiving claims information from field agents, banks receiving new account applications from branch offices, and any organization is receiving invoices from vendors and suppliers both locally and globally around the world. When you combine all the different types of information, all the formats, and all the places they're growing from, it's easy to see that any organization is facing an enormous and growing challenge. For every piece of information that comes in, before it can be of any value at all, the organization has to look at the information, understand what the information actually is, decide what to do with it, and then put it in an appropriate system or business process. This understanding and deciding is usually done by a person, but doing this manually is hugely labor-intensive, expensive, slow, and prone to error. It also prevents that person from performing more valuable stuff within the company. This is exactly where Kofax helps. When Kofax enters the equation, we significantly reduce the time and effort required to understand information and what to do with it. In a lot of applications, we can totally bypass people altogether and process information in a touchless or lights-out way. We can inject the information into the right step of a business process. We can deliver clean, accurate, purified information into the right system. All this eliminates the errors and exceptions that come from manual processing and enables significant cost savings. And in those odd occasions where you do require manual intervention, the time and effort needed for understanding and deciding is substantially reduced. It's much faster and far less expensive. This is more than just capture. It's a capture-driven process. It's business processes being automated and driven by Kofax to improve the quality and flow of the information and produce better business outcomes. And this is really what our value proposition is. Sorry about that. I thought this was quite an amusing slide. When it builds, just spend a moment to read it. And it's quite amazing, isn't it? It's not until you actually get to the end that you realize that it was gobbledygook. And the funny matching used by Kofax solves problems just as a human would. Moving on back to the hard statistics, one of our customers, Juniper Networks, were already in the upper quartile of efficiency, but knew that in order to dramatically scale up the company, they had to implement robust AP procedures and systems. They chose MarkView, Kofax's MarkView, and you can see the phenomenal results they've achieved with costs going down and productivity increasing. I think a couple of items on there to really of note is the cost per invoice has come right down, and that's, I think it's come down even lower now. And really the productivity, invoices processed per full-time employee is way and above the industry norm. And that was they were only able to achieve this by implementing Kofax's MarkView solution. In addition to the AP engine of MarkView, there are additional solutions for the MarkView user. For example, what is quite important these days, I think, is the supplier portal. With Supplier Express, it's designed solely for the interaction between suppliers and AP departments. Benefits include reduction and elimination of supplier interactions, obviously saving time and money for AP. But as a quick aside, industry metric watcher, the Hackett Group, estimates that the average AP department consumes around 2 hours a day responding to supplier invoice queries. I actually think it's higher than that. With Supplier Express, these details are provided by simply logging into the system, then there are no charges for suppliers to actually do that. The other part of the product suite is MarkView's Advisor. Advisor is really the finance manager's AP performance dashboard. And with Advisor, you get unparalleled visibility into the AP processes, from really comprehensive overviews to detailed financial reports, improving the efficiency of AP processes. It also provides an umbrella, an umbrella view of the business, quite a helicopter view, as it were. But it also enables you to reassign and escalate invoices and jobs right from within the tool. Here's a screenshot of a typical Advisor report. using data from MarkView and the ERP, a finance manager can drill down into specific trouble spots, past due invoices, for example, and take immediate remedial action. Well, that's about it from me. Many thanks for your attention, and I'll hand you back now to Susie, who's about to reveal the 4 truths. So over to you, Susie.
Thank you very much indeed, Tony. So let's focus in on what the 4 truths are that have a direct correlation between the cause and the effect. So just to put that another way, what is it? What are the 4 things that organizations are doing as far as behavior is concerned that is having a serious and significant impact on their purchase-to-pay KPIs? So based on this study, these are the 4 truths that we could come away with, and I think you'll agree with me that they really are quite stark. So truth number 1. I'll just cast your mind back to when we were talking about how aligned are your accounts payable and procurement functions. As far as good and in some cases top performing KPIs are concerned, as far as the deployment of enabling technologies, in every single case on this particular slide, you can see that those that had absolute alignment between accounts payable and procurement had higher or better KPIs and a higher deployment of enabling technologies. So this is truth number 1. So the takeaway from this particular truth is if you're not doing, if you don't have alignment between your accounts payable and procurement functions today, this is one particular behavioral activity that will have an impact on the deployment of your enabling technologies and also on your purchase-to-pay KPIs. The second truth, coming up on your screen now, is associated directly to charging mechanisms and whether or not a shared services organisation charges the business units for the services that are rendered. So you can see here that the blue bar represents those that charge based on activity-based costing, charging maybe 30 euros for a bad invoice, 4 euros for a good invoice. The red bar is that represents those that do not charge at all, and the green bar representing those that charge based on a flat fee. With P cards aside, you can see that there is a distinct adoption, or a distinct height, if you will, in payment on time, KPIs, deployment of workflow solutions, scanning and data capture solutions, and the invoicing. There's a greater or higher bars amongst those that either charge on an activity-based costing mechanism or on a flat fee. It's human behavior that if you have to pay for something, you value it more. If you have to pay for something, it has an impact on your behavior. If something is given to you for free, it doesn't matter if you are compliant or not compliant. The key message from this particular slide, or this particular truth, is that activity-based costing or itemized billing to your business units based on behavior will have a positive impact on general compliancy. If you are managing an accounts payable organization or purchase to pay organization and you're charging your business units you're charging them more for a bad invoice, i.e. a non-PO invoice, let's say, you're charging them 30 euros for that and 4 or 5 euros for a good invoice, you will over time, probably over a very short period of time, see that behavior within the purchase to pay process and users of that process, they will change their behavior so that the cost to them goes down. And there will be a very positive consequence to you instilling that out into your own internal customer base. You're probably asking, why is there a high deployment of P cards amongst those that do not charge? My response to that is P cards is very prevalent within the government sector, and the notion of charging is much more popular within the private sector. So this is how I would explain that anomaly. Coming on to the third truth, coming up on your screens now. So, do you have a purchase to pay process owner? And again, this is not a nominal job title. Actually, this isn't a job title that's been around for very long. About 4.5 years ago, when I set up sharedserviceslink.com, this really wasn't a very common title at all, and probably count on 2 hands how many purchase to pay process owners or leaders that I was aware of out in the market. Now, it's a job title which is very, very frequently seen, and I obviously only think that's a very, very positive thing. So do you have a purchase to pay process owner or leader within your business? And again, you can see here that the blue bar represents the companies that do, the red bar represents companies that do not. And you can see as far as payment on time rates being nice and high, electronic invoice volumes in some form being nice and high, adoption of P-cards, adoption of supplier portals, workflow, line level auto matching, e-invoicing and EDI. The thing that they all have in common is that the kind of the high achievers, if you will, within those categories, they all have purchase to pay process owners or leaders. So my point here is that if you don't have a purchase to pay process owner today, and you're thinking about where to put your attention over the next 12 months, and what, from an organizational perspective, what should you do, I urge you to really consider introducing a purchase to pay process owner, and ideally having global remit within your organization. The fourth and final truth coming up on your slide, on your screen now. And this comes back to league tables. Does your company publish a league table on business units and their PO compliancy rates, for example? So business units, does your company publish league tables on your business units compliancy? And again, the blue bar represents those that do, and the red bar represents those that don't. And without exception, the blue bars, those that do have league tables, are the higher performers when it comes to payment on time rates, and also the higher adopters when it comes to adopting or implementing enabling technologies. And again, it's human nature. Nobody wants to be at the bottom of a league table, especially if it's a league table that's made visible to senior management. You only want to be at the top of that league table, and it's embarrassing if you're at the bottom. I would absolutely capitalize on that human condition, if you will, and start gathering that information and making it public, so that you'll pretty much see an immediate effect that users in the purchase to pay process will start being compliant, or will continue to be compliant, or will be even more compliant with the process rules. And just going back to, casting your mind back to the purchase to pay process flow diagram that we had in the early part of this webinar, it was obvious to everybody that we've got many steps. We've got over 20 steps within the purchase to pay process. We've got 4 bodies, or 4 units, if you will, 4 components that are involved somehow in the purchase to pay process. If you are going to be encouraging good behavior, it's strategies like this, it's strategies like publishing league tables that will ensure, or at least go to ensure, compliant behavior. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's move to summary before we move to questions. Purchase to pay process is multi-stepped, it's multi-department, it's multi-company. It's your company and it's your suppliers, of which you have hundreds of thousands, and sometimes tens of thousands, and even sometimes hundreds of thousands of suppliers. And if you just take that particular factor to one side, and then you times it by the number of transactions that you have coming in every single year, which can be hundreds of thousands, millions of transactions, we're dealing with something that's it's complex. And it is therefore, because of all these factors that are involved in it, it's prone to error, it's lending itself to high cost, it's lending itself to time wastage and general inefficiencies if it is not well managed and well monitored and has a very kind of tight structure around it. The management of purchase to pay organization therefore does need to be exceptionally tight and transparent, and this feeds into your metrics and your KPIs. So to summarize the 4 trees that will help you with your kind of tight and transparent management of purchase to pay. The 4 truths that we took away, which as a behavioral aspect have a big, big impact on good KPIs and also good levels of enabling technologies and the adoption of enabling technologies. The 4 truths were the alignment of finance and procurement, charging for the services that you render, establishing a P2P process owner, and publishing league tables. I'd just like to conclude with a very, very positive slide. I've cast your mind back to what were the top 3 signed off projects for the next 12 months. And you can see here with the gold stars that all of the elements highlighted with the gold stars are functionalities and solutions enabled by Kofax SmartView. So if you're wanting to talk to Tony more about that, please do so directly after the webinar. So ladies and gentlemen, that takes us through to questions. And we do have a few moments for questions, in 9 minutes to be specific. So please start putting your questions through to us now. Just some questions that have come through. What costs were included in the average cost per invoice? Did this include the cost of systems and overheads, or was it purely salary costs of AP? So when we did the survey, we were asking, the clock started, as it were, the moment the invoice was received within the company, be it at the business unit or within the accounts payable department or the shared services organization. So that's when the clock started ticking. The clock stopped ticking once the invoice had been posted for payment. So those were the kind of middle steps that we were including. From kind of an overhead perspective, the factors that we were including into the mix were obviously salary uplift, any technologies that were specifically there to help manage the invoice process. So any workflow technologies that were there, any auto-matching technologies that were there. What we didn't factor in was obviously the building. We didn't factor in the ERP, because our view was that that was also included for other purposes. So hopefully that's answered your question. Okay, just to describe what we mean by league tables, there's a viewer that's not so familiar with what league tables actually mean. So league tables is where you have, you make it public how many, if you've got say 20 business units that you're serving, and you have you're processing transactions on all of those 20 business units, and you've got one business unit that is consistently brilliant at raising purchase orders, and 99% of the transactions you process on their behalf they're clean and they're compliant, and they indeed, if needed, have a PO behind them. And maybe you have invoices that keep on continuously bouncing from another business unit, and let's just say 7 or 8% of those invoices pass first time. You would make available on maybe a monthly, sometimes more regularly, but monthly or quarterly basis, that information. And at the top you would have the business unit that's coming in at 99%, and at the bottom you would have the business unit that's coming in at 7% first time match rate. And you will, I'm fairly sure, see that your first time match rate will increase over dramatically over a short period of time. Okay, question for you please, Tony. We've got there's reference to 106,000 invoices being processed per head per annum within Juniper Networks, one of your clients that's using the Kofax SmartView solution. Could you just, is it just down to the Kofax SmartView solution? Is there anything else that contributed to that quite significant number of invoices going through per head?
Yeah, it was quite a lot of things, Susie, actually. It was, I'd like to say it was all down to Kofax, but I don't think that would be quite true. But it's quite interesting that they actually did align finance and procurement together. They do charge for services, and they do have a process owner. I'm not sure if they published league tables or not, but the other important thing for them was they they really, in order to scale, and it was a directive from the CEO that they wanted to scale the business. So in order to do that, they really had to standardize their processes, and they wanted to standardize processes for globally, not just locally. A couple of other things they did. They actually implemented P cards actually for the low value items, and that made quite a difference to the sort of day-to-day low value items, obviously. But the other thing that is really starting to take an effect right now actually is they are embracing e-invoicing, and they're utilizing a lot of the Kofax e-invoicing facilities and functionality now. So I think it was a combination of things, but I have to say it was really down to their own mentality that they knew they had to get their processes in order, and they needed, quite simply, they needed a system and a solution to actually put into practice what they knew they had to do.
Thank you for that, Tony. Also, there's another question that's just come through which I'd like to put through to you, and it's about the blend of technology and outsourcing. So the question I've got here is technology alone or a platform-based BPO more effective? So what's your view on kind of the technology route versus the kind of the outsourcing route, or a blend of the two?
Well, that's really a really interesting and good question, and I think there's absolutely room for both. I mean, I talk to a lot of customers and prospective customers on a daily basis. Some, for example, absolutely do not want to own, they don't want to have expertise in capturing the information, whether it's by scanning or receiving emails or whatever. They would much rather just outsource it. And I think it does depend on the size and the complexity and the infrastructure of those organizations that are already set up. So for some, I think outsourcing is actually a credible and good solution. For others, they have the infrastructure in place. They're well able to do it internally, and it can be actually more, I'm not sure if it's just the cost effectiveness, but I think it's more of a control thing. And I know in the survey the control came bottom of the league in terms of cost savings and so on, but nevertheless some companies do feel that they want to be in control. But I think there's a real scope for having a real blended approach. For example, Juniper, they outsource the AP payments process, they actually bring in the technology internally to capture everything, whether it's the scanning or the emails or faxes or whatever. But they do outsource other areas of the business that's appropriate. So a bit of a cop-out, Susie, but I do think it can be a blended approach.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. I mean, again, from my experience, it normally is a bit of a blended approach as well. Most shared services organizations will say, though, if you are going to start offshoring processes, you really need to automate them as much as you can first. Because if you're going to start kind of pushing away from the business and pushing away geographically a part of your process, if you've automated it, you've got control around it already before you start pushing it out there. So another question that we've got here is, can you provide a list of standard KPIs for measuring purchase-to-pay processes based on experience of working with different clients? We have available on our website, sharedserviceslink.com, my top 10 KPIs for purchase-to-pay. So please have a look at that. But the ones that spring immediately to mind is obviously productivity per FTE per annum. That's a key one. Cost per invoice, number of touchless invoices that you have, and also I think a key one really that is coming into play is number of suppliers per 1,000 invoices. I think that's another key one. If you don't already have that one, I think that would be a good one to gather. Question as well we've got on P cards. So sorry for the terminology that we're using here. What we mean by P cards when we refer to them is procurement cards. So hopefully that answers your question. Just a final question, if I can put this one to you, Tony. Obviously, when we were talking about the AP metrics, we're talking about a number of different solutions really having to liaise with each other, talk with each other, and connect very elegantly with each other, because there isn't this kind of silver bullet that's going to solve the entire end-to-end purchase-to-pay process for all suppliers and all invoice types. As far as, obviously, you've got, we had a lot of gold stars coming up on that earlier slide. As far as the Kofax solutions, kind of plugging in with other technologies and Kofax technologies, plugging in with other Kofax technologies is concerned, my key question really is, as far as your compatibility with ERPs and other technologies is concerned, what does that look like?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And actually, just to sort of rewind a little bit, go back to the Juniper success story as well, I think it was absolutely key for them to really push and take advantage, and I'm hesitating to say leverage, but really take advantage of the power within their existing ERP solution as well, make sure it's implemented correctly. But we put all of our money, oh, that's not true, we put most of our money into integrating with the two biggies in the marketplace. That's SAP and Oracle, of course. And that's for real comprehensive workflow solutions, you know, for coding and approving, etc. But we have thousands of customers that capture documents and emails and everything else. We have thousands of customers that actually are very happy to extract that information, to validate that information, and then populate any number of ERP solutions, from PeopleSoft and JD Edwards to Aggresso and anything else that you can possibly imagine. But if you really want tight integration, workflow, coding, approval, and workflows that are out of the box, then it's really down to the Oracle and SAP solutions for us.
Tony, thank you very much indeed for that, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your time and attention. Please do join us on the 22nd of February for how to utilize SAP to create value in these turbulent economic times. This is specifically working on supply chain financing and dynamic discounting and enabling that within SAP. Do make sure that you join us for our conference series. We've got the European Summit. I think we're down to our last 5 tickets for that one, so if you haven't registered for that, please do so. It is our flagship event of the year in Europe. So thank you very much for your time and attention. I look forward to welcoming you to our webinars next time. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.